He said it the way people said things they had already decided about. Not loudly, not with heat, just with the particular flatness of a man who had made up his mind and had no interest in being argued out of it. She doesn't fit here. She was a distraction. That's all she ever was. Elena Marsh heard every word from the other side of the study door, standing very still in the hall of the Vane estate with her hand pressed flat against the wallpaper, and her heart doing something she didn't have a name for yet, something that started as pain and was already hardening into something else. She had driven 40 minutes for this dinner. She had worn the green dress that Georgia said made her look like she'd arrived from somewhere important. She had brought, wrapped carefully in a dish towel inside her tote bag, a mug she'd made herself, hand-thrown glazed deep ocean blue, the small crack near the base, filled with gold, the way the Japanese fixed broken things. She'd spent 3 weeks on it. She'd had a name for it in her head the whole time, the one I'll give him when I'm ready to say what I actually mean. She didn't give him the mug. She set it on the hall table near the front door, still wrapped in the dish towel, still perfect, and she walked back to her car in the October dark without looking back. What Sebastian Vane didn't know, what no one in that study knew, was that Elena Marsh had been 3 weeks late, and that the test she'd been too afraid to take had been sitting in the cabinet under her bathroom sink for 4 days. She took it the following morning. She sat on the bathroom floor of her apartment above the café for a long time after. Elena Marsh was not the kind of woman who fell apart in front of people. She'd learned that growing up above her parents' dry cleaning business in North Charleston, watching her mother hold herself together through things that would have leveled someone else. She had learned early that crying was something you did in private, and that the most useful thing in any hard moment was to figure out the next step. She was 31. She owned a café called Marsh and Morning on a side street in downtown Charleston, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu and a line out the door on weekend mornings, because the biscuits were made from her grandmother's recipe, and you could taste the fact that someone had cared about every single thing in them. She had started it with a small business loan and 4 years of savings, and a healthy terror that it might fail. It hadn't failed. Over 6 years, it had become something she was genuinely proud of, not just the business, but what it felt like to walk into a room that existed because she'd built it. She had met Sebastian Vane 9 months ago at a fundraiser dinner for the Children's Hospital. He'd wandered into her orbit somewhere between the cocktail hour and the seated tables, pulled there, he told her later, because she'd been arguing with the event caterer about the presentation of the appetizers with the particular confidence of someone who considered this a matter of principle rather than preference. He'd found it, he said, the most interesting thing happening in the room. She'd been skeptical of him, men like Sebastian Vane, the kind with old money and good suits and a quality of ease that came from never having had to wonder about the cost of anything, were not, in Elena's experience, interested in women like her for reasons that held up over time. He had, in the 9 months that followed, done a fairly good job of proving her wrong. The dinner at the Vane estate had been his idea. She wants to meet you, he'd said. It's informal, nothing to worry about. Elena had understood, even then, that this was not nothing. Beatrix Vane was 70 years old and had been running the Vane family's social and financial architecture since before Sebastian was born. The kind of woman described in newspaper profiles as formidable and in private conversations as something less flattering. Sebastian had mentioned her in careful, measured sentences that told Elena more about what he wasn't saying than what he was. She arrived at the estate at 7. The house sat south of the city, behind iron gates and live oaks that had been there longer than the building itself. The kind of property that didn't announce itself. She was shown to a sitting room and told Sebastian would be with her shortly. He was not with her shortly. After 20 minutes, she went looking for a bathroom, took a wrong turn, and found herself at the end of a hallway she hadn't been shown, near a door that was not fully closed, and heard voices. Her name was in the air before she understood what she was hearing. The woman from the café. That was Beatrix Vane's voice, precise and dry and without warmth. 9 months, Sebastian. I've been patient. It's a private relationship. Sebastian's voice, lower, more careful. You don't have private relationships. You have public ones and you have mistakes. A pause. This one is a mistake. The longer you let it continue, the more complicated the untangling becomes. She runs a coffee shop. She is not equipped for this family, and she knows it, even if she hasn't said so. Elena stood very still. She is not what I thought she was, Sebastian said. It won't continue. She counted to something in her chest, not seconds, something harder to measure. Then she turned around and walked back the way she'd come. Past the sitting room, past the portraits, to the hall table by the front door. She set the mug down. She didn't unwrap it. She didn't leave a note. She walked to her car and drove back to the city with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, and the particular clarity that came from hearing something you couldn't unhear. She didn't cry until she was on the bridge. Then she did, the way her mother had taught her, quietly, completely, without asking anyone to witness it. Georgia Baines had been Elena's best friend since their sophomore year at College of Charleston. She arrived at Elena's apartment 11 minutes after the call, with a bag from the Thai place on King Street and the expression of someone who had already made peace with whatever the night was going to require. Elena was sitting at the kitchen table with the test in her hands. Georgia sat down. She looked at the test. She looked at Elena. How far? I don't know. A few weeks, maybe more. I've been tired. I thought it was the fall rush. Georgia nodded, the nod of a nurse absorbing information before speaking around it. Is it? Yes. A silence. What do you want to do? Elena looked at the test. She looked at her kitchen, her apartment, the life she had built above the café that was entirely hers. She thought about her mother. She thought about the mug on the hall table at the Vane estate, wrapped in a dish towel, uncollected. Keep it, she said. She hadn't known until she said it that the decision was already made. Both of us. Okay, no hesitation. Then that's what we're doing. I'm not telling him. Georgia was quiet. Elena, I know what you're going to say. I'm going to say, Georgia said carefully, that a man who tells his mother you're not what he thought you were doesn't necessarily get to decide what happens next. But I'm also going to say that you'll have to figure out what you believe is right, and both those things can be true at the same time. I need time, Elena said. I need to think. Okay, but eat something real. You've been running on coffee and stubbornness for 3 days. If this story is already sitting somewhere in your chest, you're not alone. Thousands of people have been right where you are, needing to know what comes next. Subscribe to Hidden Desire Stories so you never miss the rest, because this one is only getting started. Like the video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Now let's go back. Sebastian Vane spent the 4 days after the dinner discovering what it felt like to make a catastrophic miscalculation and not be able to find the edge of it. He had said what he'd been told to say. He had stood in his mother's study and understood in real time the specific cruelty of what she was asking. That he perform indifference about a person he was not indifferent to, in front of his mother's attorney, a man named Whitmore, who had been advising the Vane family on strategic considerations. Since before Sebastian understood what that phrase meant. His mother had not issued an ultimatum. She didn't need to. The Vane family's leverage was architectural, woven into the bones of every business Sebastian had built, into partnerships and agreements, and inherited obligations so tightly threaded into the legitimate structure that separating them would take years. His mother knew this. She had designed it this way. He had said the words. He had believed in that study that cruelty at close range was kinder than the alternative, which was Elena becoming visible to the people his family owed favors to, and who collected leverage the way others collected insurance. He had not accounted for the possibility that she'd been in the hall. He found out 40 minutes later when he went to the sitting room and found it empty except for the absence of her coat. When he went to the hall table and found the dish towel folded carefully and nothing inside it. He stood there for a moment. He understood what he was looking at, an empty circle of fabric where something had been removed by its maker before it could be given. He called her 7 times that night. He texted. He wrote an email at midnight and rewrote it and sent it and stared at his inbox for 2 days without a response. His head of security, Tobias, found him at 5 in the morning, standing in his kitchen with a cup of cold coffee and the dish towel from the hall table on the counter, which he'd taken and couldn't put anywhere else. "You look like something's wrong with you," Tobias said, sitting down without being asked. "I've had eyes on her building since last Tuesday." He wrapped both hands around a mug. "She's fine. Goes to the café at 5 every morning, closes around 3, teaches a pottery class on Wednesdays. She's not seeing anyone." He paused. "She looks tired." The word landed specifically. "I need her to understand." "What exactly?" Tobias's voice was direct without being unkind. "That you called her not what you thought she was in front of your mother and her attorney? That you did it to protect her? In my experience, the explanation doesn't change what was heard. It just adds more words to the wound." "Some people only have one leaving in them," Tobias said. "They do it once, and it's done. You need to figure out if she's one of those." Sebastian already knew the answer. What Sebastian also didn't know was that his younger brother Alec had been paying attention long before the dinner. Alec Vane was 33 and occupied the particular position of the family member who was trusted precisely because he was useful, willing to do the things that needed doing without requiring an explanation. He had watched Sebastian and Elena with the specific interest of someone who understood that a complication managed early never became a crisis. The night of the dinner, while Sebastian sat in the study trying to recover his composure, Alec had made 2 phone calls. Sebastian's calls reached Elena's phone. His texts arrived. But the voicemails, increasingly raw, increasingly unlike the composed man she'd spent 9 months reading, were quietly redirected. Elena watched the missed calls accumulate. She read the one text that slipped through, "I need to explain, please." She set the phone face down on the cafe counter and went back to the morning prep. 200 biscuits didn't make themselves. Sebastian waited for a response that wasn't coming. It was Georgia who eventually gave them the thread to pull. Tobias had found her at a coffee shop near the hospital where she worked and sat down across from her with the posture of someone who needed information more than he wanted to admit. "She's not going to call him." "I know." "Then what do you want?" "I want to know if she's all right." Georgia studied him. "She's managing. That's not the same as all right." "No, it's not." "He needs her to know what happened. At the estate wasn't what it looked like," Tobias said. "He called her not what he thought she was," Georgia said, and her voice didn't rise, which made it land harder. In front of his mother and her attorney, she looked at him, and then he sent a letter to her old address on Rutledge Avenue. She moved 8 months ago. Sebastian knew the new address. She gave it to him in February. Tobias went very still. "So either someone sent it to the wrong place without checking," Georgia said, "or someone sent it to the wrong place on purpose." Tobias sat with that for 4 seconds. Then he put his phone face down on the table. "Does she know this?" "She knows the letter went to the wrong address. She hasn't thought through why." "Has she read it?" "No." Georgia picked up her coffee. "Before you make your call, she's not just managing a broken heart, she's managing more than that." She looked at him steadily. "Whatever Sebastian is doing to fix this, he needs to do it because he actually understands what he did and who he did it to. Not because he's lonely, because she is building a life right now. Whatever comes through her door has to be worth the disruption." She left before he could ask the follow-up question that was already forming. The proof took 4 days. The letter had been dispatched correctly, new address, exactly as Sebastian had written it. Somewhere between dispatch and delivery, the destination had been changed. The request had come from an internal account in the Vane Building's communication system. The account belonged to Alec. Tobias set the printout on Sebastian's desk. Sebastian read it once, put it face down, sat with his hands flat on the mahogany. 2 months, he said. At least, there may be more records. Under my mother's direction. Almost certainly. Sebastian looked at the far wall. He had built a career inside the vein structure, always understanding that the legitimate and the inherited were intertwined in ways that couldn't be cleanly separated. His mother had made sure of that. He had made his peace with it, or told himself he had. Set up a meeting, he said, somewhere neutral, on the water, somewhere she'd actually agree to go. And the letter. Get it back yourself, and when you have it, send it again, with everything. Every call log, every email, everything intercepted. She sees all of it. Tobias was quiet. She may not respond even then. I know. Sebastian looked at the dish towel, still on the corner of his desk where it had been for 6 weeks. She's building a life. Georgia said that word specifically. Building, not rebuilding. Tobias said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. She's pregnant, Sebastian said. It wasn't a question. He sat there with the weight of it, with the dish towel in his hands and the printout face down and the city 11 floors below. While everything he thought he understood about the last 2 months shifted into something larger and less reversible than a broken relationship, or a redirected letter, or a family that had been building walls around him since childhood. He had been searching for the woman he'd pushed away. He hadn't known he was also searching for his child. He went to the estate the next morning. His mother was in the dining room. Alec was already seated. The table arranged between them like a stage set. Retract whatever instruction you're operating under, Sebastian said. Whatever Elena's received, whatever's been staged, end it today. I acted in this family's interest. You went into a pregnant woman's life and systematically closed every door I tried to open. Sebastian's voice stayed quiet, the quiet that people who knew him recognized as the more dangerous register. That is not this family's interest. That is cowardice, written in my name. His mother set down her coffee. You've been trying to undo a decision that was made correctly. That's sentiment, Sebastian. Sentiment is not strategy. She's carrying my child. The word landed. Something shifted in Beatrix Vane's composure, the eyes sharpening by a degree. That complicates things, she said. Yes. Sebastian looked at her, which is why I'm done, with the operational structure, with the arrangements and the leverage and the architecture. You spent 30 years weaving around things I actually built. I'm done. He looked at Alec. If you contact Elena again, through attorneys, through couriers, in any form, I will give the federal task force everything I have. Every record, every arrangement, everything I know, which is considerable. Alec stood up. You're bluffing. Try me. The silence that followed was different from the one before it. The silence of a room in which everyone present was rapidly recalculating whether they'd misjudged how far this person could be pushed. His mother sat very still. Get out of this house, she said finally, and for the first time Sebastian could remember, the effort of her composure was visible on its surface. I'll be in touch through attorneys, Sebastian said. He was in the car heading back to the city when Tobias called. She agreed to a meeting. When? Saturday. Somewhere public on the water. She's bringing Georgia. Fine. She also said, a pause. She's not coming to hear an apology. If the meeting is just going to be an explanation, she'd rather not waste the time, her words. Then it won't be just that. What will it be? Sebastian thought about the printout, about the dish towel, about a woman who had made something beautiful with her hands and left it on a table rather than make a scene, and who was currently, by his best estimate, building her life without him as deliberately and quietly as she did everything else. The truth, he said, all of it. The restaurant was called the Harbor Room, and it sat at the edge of the Cooper River with floor-to-ceiling windows and gray water wide beyond them. Sebastian was there when Elena arrived, a corner table, quieter than she'd expected him to choose. He stood when she came in. He always had. He saw her, and she watched his face do the things she'd been afraid of. The precise moment of understanding crossing it, The composed man suddenly present and unguarded in a way she recognized from before, and that made something in her chest pull hard in a direction she hadn't prepared for. She was 5 months along, it showed. She sat down across from him without speaking. Georgia sat beside her. Sebastian put his hands flat on the tablecloth. "Thank you for coming." "I'm here for information," Elena said, "not because anything is resolved." "I know." "Then say what you need to say." He said it, all of it, the dinner, and what his mother had said before Elena had even arrived. The specific and detailed threat Beatrix had laid out about what happened to anyone connected to Sebastian who wasn't inside the family's protection. The calculation he'd made in the study, that cruelty delivered publicly would read as finality and keep Elena out of the threat radius permanently. The weeks afterward, the calls, the emails, the letter, the courier. Then he put the printout on the table. Elena picked it up. Read it fully, without rushing. Her face doing the careful neutral thing it did when she was absorbing something that required processing before reaction. "Alec," she said. "Yes." "Your brother." "Yes." "Under your mother's instruction." "Yes." He paused. "I confronted her yesterday. She confirmed it." Elena set the printout down. She looked at the river. She was quiet long enough that Georgia put one hand lightly on the table, not touching her, just present. "So every time I decided you'd made your choice," Elena said, "every time I told myself I was being rational about what I heard, you were actually trying to reach me, and someone was making sure I didn't know that." "Yes." "For 2 months." "Yes." She looked at him. "And you expect me to do what with that?" "Nothing," he said. "I needed you to have the whole picture. What you do with it is yours." A silence. On the river, a boat moved slow and purposeful. "I'm having this baby," Elena said. "I know." "You've known how long?" 4 days. She nodded, the nod of someone filing information. "What do you want?" "To be in this child's life. To earn that. I'm not asking you to take me back or forgive me on any timeline. I'm asking for the chance to show you that what you spent 9 months getting to know was real. Not a performance, not a version of me constructed for your benefit." Elena looked at him for a long time. She looked at the printout. She looked at her hands. "I need to think," she said. "I know." "That's not a yes." "I know." "It's also not a no," Georgia said quietly, and Elena looked at her with the particular expression she used when she was choosing not to argue with something she knew was true. The conversation moved into smaller territory after that. Not warm, but not hostile. The careful navigation of two people trying to find ground between them that was still solid. When they left, Sebastian walked her to the car she'd arranged herself. He stopped at the curb. "The medical costs," he said. "Whatever this pregnancy needs, I'd like to be responsible for that, regardless of anything else." "I'll think about it." He nodded. "Sebastian," she stopped with her hand on the door. "If I let you anywhere near this, and you choose that world over this child, even once, your mother's calculations, your brother's arrangements, any of it, I will disappear, and your attorneys will spend years looking." Her voice was level. "Do you understand that?" "Yes," he said. She got in the car. 4 days later, at 11:30 at night, something was slid under the door of Elena's apartment above the café. A legal envelope. Her name in handwriting that wasn't Sebastian's. Inside, a financial settlement, 8 figures, precisely structured, in exchange for the permanent and irrevocable termination of all parental rights. No vain name on the birth certificate. No inheritance, no legal standing. Ever. A handwritten note from Alec at the bottom. "This is the cleanest outcome for everyone, including the child. You know what they'll grow into if you refuse." Elena sat on her kitchen floor for 3 hours. She called Georgia at 2 in the morning. She didn't cry. She was past that. Tobias called Sebastian at 6 the next morning with the particular flatness in his voice that meant the information was bad enough that inflection would only make it worse. Sebastian was already standing before Tobias finished the sentence. He drove to the estate himself. His mother was at the breakfast table. Alec was already seated. Sebastian picked up the copy of the settlement sitting beside his mother's plate. He held it for 1 second and set it back down. "Call it off," he said. "Retract the document, pull the attorneys. Whatever Alec is operating under, end it. Today." His mother poured coffee. "Sit down." "I'm not sitting down." Alec acted in this family's. Alec went to a pregnant woman's apartment at midnight and slid a legal threat under her door. Sebastian's voice went down, not up. "That is not this family's interest. That is cowardice in legal language." Alec set down his fork. "It's a generous offer. She'd be financially." "Don't." Sebastian turned and looked at his brother fully, and something in his face made Alec stop mid-sentence. "Don't explain the math on my child to me." The word sat in the room. His mother looked at him over her coffee cup, the measuring look she'd given him his entire life, taking stock of usefulness and control and capacity. "You've lost perspective," she said. "I found it." He looked at her steadily. "I'll remove the name from what it's attached to. I'm done with the structure. If Alec contacts Elena again in any form, through attorneys, couriers, anyone, I give the federal task force everything I have, every record, every arrangement, everything I know, and I know a great deal." He looked at Alec. "Try me." His mother was quiet for a long time. "Get out of this house," she said finally. "I'll be in touch through attorneys," Sebastian said and left. Elena agreed to see him one more time, at Georgia's apartment after Tobias told Georgia what he'd found about Alec. Not just the intercepted letters, but the surveillance that had started before the dinner, before anything had been said out loud. Alec had seen what Elena was to Sebastian before the estate dinner, and he had begun managing it early. Elena was standing in Georgia's kitchen with both hands flat on the counter when Sebastian arrived. She turned when she heard him come in. "Your brother was watching me before the dinner," she said. "Yes." "So the dinner wasn't your mother reacting. It was arranged." "Yes." She looked at him. He knew about the baby. "Since 8 weeks, he knew exactly what that document was asking you to sign away." "Yes." She turned back to the window, then back to him. "What are you going to do?" "I ended it with my mother this morning. The structure, the operations, all of it. I'm done. I told her if Alec contacts you again, I cooperate with the investigation that's been building for 3 years." Elena took the information in steadily. "That's everything your family built. Everything they built. What I built is separate. It'll take time to clean up, but the lines are there because I drew them." "Why?" He looked at her. "Because my brother put a document under your door at midnight. Because my mother had a copy at her breakfast table." He stopped, then said the next part without smoothing it. "Because I have spent 2 months trying to reach you and being blocked at every turn, and every time I understood more clearly what you are to me and what they were doing to prevent me from being allowed to." He stopped again. "To what?" Elena said. "To be someone who deserved to be in the same room as you." The kitchen was quiet. Outside, Charleston was doing its Saturday morning thing. A dog somewhere, a car, someone's radio 2 floors down. Elena pulled out a chair and sat down, not because she was inviting him to sit, but because she needed to be in a chair. "If I let you into this," she said, "what does that look like? Not in principle, in practice. I've had attorneys working on the formal separation for a week. The investment firm is clean. The real estate holdings are clean. What I built legitimately is separable." "I don't need your money," Elena said. "I have a café. I have Georgia. I have a life I've been building for 5 months without anyone's help." She looked at him. "I'm asking about presence, about what it looks like when you show up. Because showing up is what a child needs." Her voice stayed level. "I grew up with a father who loved us and worked himself into the ground for us and was still somehow never quite there. I know what it does to a kid. I will not build something with you and then explain to this child someday that you had reasons, that the world was complicated. I would rather do this alone than do it with a set of carefully managed excuses." "I know," he said. "I mean it. I know you do." He sat down across from her. He put his hands on the table. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking for the time to show you that the person you spent 9 months getting to know was real. Not the name, not the family. The man who couldn't sleep for 2 months because a dish towel on his kitchen counter was the most honest thing anyone had ever done for him in his adult life. He exhaled slowly. That man is what's here. Elena looked at him. She looked at his hands on the table, at the window, at her own hands. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen, and her face changed, not dramatically, but something moved across the composure. "It's my OB," she said. "She's been monitoring my blood pressure." He was on his feet before she finished the sentence. She stopped. She looked at him. In Georgia's kitchen doorway, 5 months pregnant, on no sleep, with everything between them still unresolved and suspended, she looked at him and made a decision that was not forgiveness and was not trust and did not have a word that fit it cleanly. Something more basic than that, the decision of a person who is frightened and is standing next to someone and does not, in this specific moment, want to be alone. "Okay," she said. One word, both of them understood what it carried. The diagnosis was early-stage preeclampsia. Her OB wanted to admit her for observation. Sebastian sat in the waiting room with Tobias and his hands on his knees and did not perform calm. He held it the way you held something you couldn't afford to drop. Georgia came out after 20 minutes. "She's asking for you." She looked at him directly. "Don't make it mean more than it is. She's scared. She's alone in there. She's asking because you're here." A pause. "But she's asking." He walked the hall and pushed open the door. Elena was in the monitoring bed, blood pressure cuff on her arm, and the sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the small room. One rhythm, small and bright and absolutely certain of itself. She turned her head and looked at him. "Hi," she said. Her voice was tired. "Hi." He pulled the chair close and sat down. "The sound's good," she said, looking at the monitor. "Yeah." Her hand was on her stomach. The blood pressure cuff inflated every 15 minutes. The readings came back slightly better, then slightly better again. "Elena," he started. "Don't," she said. "Not right now." She looked at the ceiling. "Just stay." "Okay," he said. He stayed. He sat in that chair while the monitor tracked the heartbeat that was not yet in the world, while the institutional light did its inadequate best, while outside the window the city went on the way cities went on, regardless of what was happening inside any given room within them. He sat and said nothing. Eventually her hand moved from her stomach and settled on the arm of his chair, not quite touching him, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of it. She closed her eyes. That was where they were when her OB returned 40 minutes later with updated readings and said the numbers had improved enough to discuss discharge with strict at-home monitoring. "Thank you," Elena said. The doctor glanced at Sebastian once, not approving, not disapproving, simply registering, and left. "You should go home," Elena said. "Sleep." "I'm fine." "You've been in that chair for 5 hours. It's a good chair." She looked at him. He looked back, the impasse of two people too tired to argue and too stubborn to concede. "I'll be down the hall," he said. "Family waiting room." "I know." She looked at the monitor. Sebastian. He stopped at the door, the weeks after the estate. "Every time I told myself you'd chosen your family over me, and I was making peace with it, I built the whole last 2 months on that story, built it solid." She looked at the ceiling and then back at him. "It's strange. Finding out the foundation was wrong." "I know." "I don't know what to do with you yet," she said. "Take the time you need. I'll be down the hall." He went. He stood in the hallway for a moment with his back against the wall, listening to the ordinary sounds of the hospital. He had spent 2 months trying to find a woman who had been unreachable through no fault of her own. He had spent the last week beginning to understand that finding her and being allowed back in were two entirely different things, and that the second one was going to take longer and cost more and matter more than anything he had built in 39 years. He was willing to pay that. Elena went home on Sunday. Georgia drove. Sebastian sat in the back seat, not touching her, present in the way he'd been since the hospital, close enough to feel, far enough to not require accounting for. Her apartment was as she'd left it, the café smell rising through the floor. The pottery on the windowsill, each piece different, each with the particular quality of something made by hand. The dish towel she'd used to wrap the mug was still on her kitchen counter. She'd retrieved it from the hall table at the estate weeks ago, during a visit she'd told herself was about a jacket she'd left behind. She hadn't been able to throw it out. Sebastian stood just inside the door and looked at the room, at the same thing she was looking at. "I should go," he said. "Probably." He had his hand on the doorframe, not quite leaving. "I know nothing is resolved," he said. "I know you need time, and that's right. But I want you to know," and she recognized it, the place where the managed version of him would normally smooth the sentence into something presentable. He let it stay rough. The last 2 months. Every door that got closed. It didn't make me less certain about what I want. It made me more certain. I know that doesn't obligate you to anything. I just wanted to say it out loud at least once. Elena looked at him in her doorway. The man who had said the most devastating thing she'd ever had said about herself. The man who had sat in a hospital chair for 5 hours because she hadn't wanted to be alone. The man who, according to Tobias, had left a book on prenatal complications on her nightstand with a sticky note that said pages 45-62 are the useful ones, without ever mentioning it. People were not their worst sentences. She had believed that when she'd built this café. She'd believed it when she decided to keep this baby. She was finding, against her better judgment, and with considerably more evidence than she'd started with, that she believed it about him. "Come Thursday morning," she said. 6 o'clock, before we open. I'll make you something." He looked at her. "Don't make it a thing," she said. "It's coffee and a biscuit. But come." She held his eyes. "We're not back to before. Whatever this is, it starts from here, from what we actually know about each other, not from September." "I understand." "Good." She looked at the door. "Good night." "Good night," he said. He left. She listened to his footsteps on the stairs until she couldn't hear them anymore. Then she sat on the couch and put both hands on her stomach and felt the baby moving. The small, deliberate pressure that she was only beginning to understand was a language all its own. "Okay," she said quietly, to the room, to them, to whatever version of the future was still being written. The cafe smelled like flour and coffee and something entirely hers. She had built this. She had built all of it. Whatever came next, she was building that too, carefully, honestly, one Thursday morning at a time.